Hello and welcome to the last session of second course. Today we're going to talk about the definition of Rahman and Rahim in Erfan Halgheh, the reasons of the design of death, definition of Kamal and the definition of death and birth in the past lives and the next life, management of the desires of the nafs, the serpents of mind and psyche, definition of attraction and repulsion, and the mental energy management. Before we start, let's start with some reports, as always, or if there's any question, and we start the material. Anyone would like to share? Everyone have my voice and the video? Okay. All right. Anything to share or any question? Okay. The first topic we're going to discuss is the divine rahmat. There's two part of this divine rahmat. There's rahmaniyat and there's rahimiyat. In any type of connection with God, regardless of whether that is individual or collective, the factor that delivers that divine reward or consequences of that connection is that divine and godly rahmat. This divine rahmat is an aspect that cannot be separated from any connection with God, and it is the ishq that is flowing throughout the entire existence with two specific characteristic of Rahmaniyat and Rahimiyat. The Rahmaniyat and Rahimiyat is a ishq in a pushing and pulling, giving and taking back aspects that it caused the manifestation of God, the creation, in various different forms. And one aspect is called Rahmaniyat and the other Rahimiyat. Rahmaniyat is where the manifestation of the creation happens, as you can see in the chart here. So we have Rahmaniyat and then we have Rahimiyat. So this aspects of giving is Rahmaniyat, and the aspects of taking it back is Rahimiyat, or in another analogy that Dr. Tari uses is kind of like exhale and inhale, that it indicates that ishq-based process of giving and taking it back to its original state. Now, based on this definition of giving and taking back, that Rahmaniyat and Rahimiyat, we get introduced with this divine true essence of God that has this exhale causing the manifestation, and the inhale, everything returning back to its source. So anything that is once manifested and created, which this motion is the separation from its source, the more limited, the more closer to manifestation it gets, the further from its source it becomes. And the reason is that the source, the essence of God, cannot be contained in a form of manifestation in one particular way. So any particular form of existence that we see, any type of manifestation, is one of the infinite possibilities, is one of the infinite images of God. But we cannot really point at one image and calling it that is the image of God only, because that would render anything else separated from being an image of God, and that is a contradiction. So anything that it manifests, it goes through a process, and that process is manifestation, gets to this most further point in the manifestation. And in order for the process to not move further infinitely toward separation, infinitely toward um, uh, infinitely toward dissension, then it is necessary for this pivotal point of returning and turning back and going toward the original source. And that maintains the philosophy of creation in terms of the resolution and fulfilling and following its specific goal. So any Rahmaniyat aspects follows by Rahimiyat. Any giving, it follows by taking back. Any creation follows by um, going back to its source. So any type of motion toward any type of dissension would follow the ascension. So this push and pull forces that we see as a result of the Rahmaniyat aspects of God is this push of manifestation and pulling back to its source in order to stop that infinite dissension and separation from the unity orientation. What it is very important here is this dual characteristic or dual aspects that resembles the ascension and descension of the motion that we have throughout the existence. This dual role in any moment is present. This dual role is present in any moment and in any existence in various different forms, because any parts of existence at any given moment has its own existence as a result of the essence of God. So in any of the levels of manifestation, there is this constant aspects based on the philosophy of creation, which is being revealed. From this point, anything that is created does not have a free will in that sense, and it cannot be deviated from its original role. So from this perspective, all the parts of existence has a effect on the existence of it has an effect of the manifestation and representation and revealing that Rahmaniyat aspects of God. We can see it in this photo. We have this part that we see that it's the effect of involuntary reflection, and we have the effect of voluntary and involuntary reflection. I'll get to that in a moment. So we have this two aspects. We have Rahmaniyat, which is giving and separating from the source to the bottom of the cycle, and then this pivotal moment that it returns back to its source, and that's Rahimiyat. That's inclusive. That's the same for the realms and all their parts, including human beings. There are some differences that we're gonna discuss in a moment. Any questions so far? Okay. In this regard, it is only humans that have a mission of servitude. It has a specific task description. It has a divine mission that is defined based on this dual aspects of ishq and free will. So within this dynamic, the choice of good virtue against evil, it shows its existence on the fact that we can have free will and we are able to practice it. In another word, the creation of all the parts of existence based on logic and intelligence, and humans are the only aspects that are equipped with this essence of ishq and that potential that makes us capable of comprehending and understanding ishq. Ishq itself, it gives, ishq itself gives a particular complexity to human existence, a mysterious aspect that causes value and special status in the entire existence that makes all the manifestations in a way prostrating before him. A reference of the story in religious scriptures. If you remember in the story of Adam's creation, Adam was created and God asked all the angels to come and prostrate before him as because of that special essence that was present in Adam, but it was not in any other types of existence or in any other creation. So as a result of the existence of Ishq and this dual force of giving and taking away and this exhale and inhale, it gave human being the possibility and an opportunity to be able to practice free will and experience ishq. Experience an ishq that is willingly practiced, experiencing a willful ishq. So through that free will, he can either be a creator of virtue and good or evil. This good and evil would be reflected to the higher realm, and the reflection of that would be affecting the entire existence and himself accordingly, which means that there is this exhale that would result in inhale, and whatever that exhale putting out, then it would be reflected and it would be inhale in their existence. So if they're putting out virtue and good, then they would receive good as well. And if it's evil, then as well, they would receive back evil. So this law that we were introduced before is the law of reflection, which is the basis of rahimiyat. Any question? Okay. The next topic we're going to talk about is death. One of the most important aspects in Kamal journey for us to be introduced and to be experienced is the concept of death. In general, death is a phenomenon that any individuals would experience, and it is a transformational aspects that guides Adamians from one life to another. And for this reason, even when someone is in the Erfanic journey, they would have some sort of the transformational, ma'rifat-based transformation. It is kind of like a divine knowledge. It's a transformation that is based on divine knowledge, which it could metaphorically refer to as an Erfanic death. Because if you consider death as a transformation from one state to another, from one state of being to another, then for one also could be defined for one also having transformation in Erfanic journey, being reborn in a different state could also be exampled as a death, because from this transformation, their life turns to a new life. But here, exclusively, what we mean is an actual phenomena of death, when Adamians, when human beings are moving from this life and passing through the journey toward the pathway to the return pathway. So what we mean by death here is the pathway in which humans are going from this life to the next and toward God and their source. With death here, we will enter a realm called Barzakh, which is an intermediary stage between each life. So each life has its own Barzakh, which is an intermediary stage, sharing the same space with the current life, just in a different frequency. But after the individuals passing through that Barzakh, they would go and enter the next life, and they would be transferred to the next life. Any questions so far? Okay. All the human beings have some familiarity on the apparent definition and concept of death, but there are only few individuals that have more deeper understanding about the truth of death. And so all the individuals have some understanding about the apparent definition and concept of death, but there are only few people that have understanding and a correct worldview and approach to the truth behind the death. The individuals that are merely relying on their apparent definition of death are often escaping or trying to escape death. But the individuals that are aware of the truth of death, even though that they're celebrating life and existence, but they are excited and embracing that concept as they see it as a pathway and a stage closer to beloved, a manifestation of Rahimiyat aspects of God. Death as a phenomena that helps individuals to pass through the different stages from neediness toward needlessness, from multiplicity to unity, from the lower stages to higher stages closer to beloved, not only becomes a notion that a phenomena that is to be scared of, but also something to be celebrated and to be looked at as opportunity and a privilege. So death, a phenomena that is a factor to move through the lives and going through the process and stages of afterlife, has a very specific importance in Erfan Halgheh. The introduction with the afterlife helps us to understand the reason behind the design of death, the death from this world, and so on, the awareness and understanding of the phenomena of death. It helps us to know what do we expect when that happens, and to be familiar with what is necessary what type of knowledge and awareness is necessary for us to be ready to go through that process easier. There are some concepts which is very interesting. It's more like a cultural references. For example, we have a concept فشار قبر, which literally means the pressure of grave, and the questions regarding what happens after death, that all these knowledge and awareness about the death concepts and what happens helps individuals to get their answers. So let's talk about the reason behind the design of death. Humans, in their software, in their most fundamental software, in their motherboard, they have the desire and tendency to meet God. But with all the needs that we have, with all the limitations we have, we cannot really meet God because the level of the God's presence and the quality in which exists is different than anything that we can think of, which means that for such a meeting, we need to move from neediness to needlessness for that to happen. However, precisely speaking, we can look at it and think of this desire being intrinsically present, and also the phenomena of death as a factor in which would help individuals move toward the source and toward that return journey. Then we encounter the design, the reason behind the design of death, a design that creation itself would have to have a good reason or have to be um, considering the fact that the creation has no faults in its design and its manifestation. So for any aspects or phenomena that exists, there has to be a very precise and very um, um, detailed and very good reason. It is not that it is not for the reason of God not wanting to a kind of wanting to take revenge or punish us for um, the reason of existence of death, but rather the reason of death is God didn't want us to remain in neediness for infinity. Imagine if we were to live forever, then we were bound to look for chickens forever or carrots. We would have to infinitely fulfill our needs and desires and these limitations. So the fact that death exists, it helps us and facilitate that revealing um, necessity of revealing from the neediness and not being constantly bound by the most basic factors of survival. Therefore, the desire to connect and unify and merge with God, the phenomena of death and other aspects that are facilitating the result of this plan are there. So we go through the journey of Kamal, we get introduced with the concept of Ishq on a practical and experiential level and willfully, so we can gain enough experiences to become one with God, to become ready to meet God. So meeting with God, per se, is a very special goal, And in order for us to achieve that, it is necessary for us to achieve God-like specification and attributes for that meeting to exist, for that meeting to be possible. The journey of intrinsic motion toward God, it provides this possibility that with that with its specification, with this particular specifications required to be achieved for that meeting, for example, needlessness, to helps us to move forward throughout this journey and to be able to get to that result. So, considering the fact that meeting with God is a very special goal and it requires a lot of preparation and specification, you need to understand the attributes of God, because meeting with God means that we are becoming closer and closer with God so we can meet Him where He is rather than making Him smaller to our understanding. Because any effort to understand God or bringing God to our level is belittling God, and that would not be a true God. In order for us to meet the true God, we need to expand ourselves and go beyond the limitation of this dimension and beyond, which is only possible through the stages of lives, through series of birth and death that puts us through a practical and experiential journey to willfully uh, take steps and experience and gain enough awareness and knowledge to be able to know how to use that treasure box of beloved's attribute and to become closer and closer to the attributes of God so we can meet Him where He is and in that higher quality. One of these specific aspects is that needlessness, which is necessary for us to move forward and for that unification. So, in summary, one of the most important aspects that um, helps humans on the journey of moving from neediness to needlessness is death. So, death is not only something to be feared of, it's a mercy that God gave us so we would not be infinitely needy and infinitely limited and infinitely separated from God. Rather, by having the death as an aspect that takes away those limiting dimension from us, it peels off these extra heavy layers of existence, giving us the opportunity to becoming closer and closer and closer to God. So death indeed is an aspect that leads us toward higher states of being and closer to meet God. Any question? No question? It might seems like without death, we might be able to go toward neediness because we have been seeing that there are many people that are trying to live in neediness or sorry, because we have seen individuals that are aiming toward needlessness. or try to live minimally or take as less as they can. But the truth is that any of these examples, no matter how extreme they are very distant from the needlessness that we are talking about. Humans, from the very beginning stages of death, of birth, are 100% in need. And gradually, with the help of others, they are able to become more independent and more needless. But that doesn't mean that they're completely needless, because they are only able to just take care of themselves and provide for themselves or maybe for some other people. But that doesn't mean that they're needless. Therefore, the more needless we become on a physical level, on the level that we can achieve in this realm, we still gonna be needy in some level. So we can see some extreme ascetic individuals that they maybe live off of one almond a day or a few days, or they try to not own anything, or they try to go against many of their human needs in order for in order to in order to achieve that needlessness. But in many cases, some of the most important aspects for them is the need for receiving attention and admiration and be praised. And this could be sometimes they might have their needlessness toward food, or they might sometimes be toward showing some powers. So regardless of what they're aiming in terms of an ascetic approach, regardless of whether sometimes their needlessness is limited to limited to food, or whether they try to get some powers in the process of their um, practices and show those powers. But regardless of how needless they become in terms of their food, they might be still needy in terms of attention and being noticed by others and appreciated. But if we pay attention, we can see that these needs are different in terms of sublimity among ordinary individuals. So the relation, so the ratio of these needs are different among ordinary people. And we can see that these individuals are always in need of attention or kindness or approval or appraising or being praised by others, and etc. And if this need is not provided, their health or their positive state is negatively affected. Sometimes individuals even go as far as making sure that they get these type of energies from individuals' attention in various different ways, uh, leading them to operate in a specific way that it might not be actually harmonious. So we can see that regardless of this ascetic extreme practices, the individual still would remain needy, no matter how hard they try. Now, if someone would get to that state, let's say they put all their effort to become needless in one way, and then develop a higher levels of need in another way, that doesn't really help with the overall process of needlessness. So some individuals, in contrary, even if they have some deficiencies in terms of, let's say, receiving attention or being praised, or other people would mock them, or things like that, they might develop uh, depression, or they might have their overall physical well-being to be compromised. We are familiar in Erfan Halgheh, we believe in a type of energy that is not coming through a food source, and and we call it energy type 2. In Erfan Halgheh, energy type 2 is a type of energy that is not coming from food, and rather comes from individuals' attention or approval, or um, uh, if someone being praised. And the more individuals are spiritually grown, the less they are dependent on this energy. And it's type of an energy that we don't see individuals that manage to reduce their, let's say, food consumption, be able to also reducing that, and they remain in that neediness. After death, the problem of neediness is not completely resolved, even though that we lose the physical body, we lose emotional body, so we don't really need food anymore, we don't have emotions anymore. So a lot of those limitations associated with those bodies is resolved, but that doesn't mean that all of our needs and all of our desires is met. After death, even though that this space dimension is not dominating us, we are still in a space, but we don't have bodies, so it doesn't take time for us to go from one place to the other. We don't need food, and the necessities that comes with a space dimension, and we have much more freedom in terms of operation. We should be able to operate in a more optimal way in terms of uh, the journey of Kamal. But even not being bound by those needs is not enough, because because we need um, more processes of peeling off these needs, and more deaths for us to be freed from those limiting dimensions, and our needlessness to increase. So in general, paying attention to the unique specification of death and the reason behind its creation and its design, it helps us to accept this divine aspects of God, that exclusive rahmat of God, and to understand the value of his existence on our deepest level. Because what is important is to return to our source, the unification with God, and death is the aspect that helps us with that process. Any question? Okay. Let's talk about the moment of death. Considering the death is one of the divine manifestations of God, uh, uh, considering the death is one of the divine manifestations of Rahmat, any individuals would be having an experience of this divine rahmat in a particular way, and that is depending on what they're attached to can be different. The death represents that divine rahmat of God, and every individuals would be able to experience that joyful and uh, pleasant experience. Any death, regardless of the types of death, or regardless of what stage that death is, has that pleasant and joyful aspects. So any type of death, even let's say is in a very unfortunate accident, the moment that the spirit is being separated from the physical body is an enormous experience of joy and a very sweet experience that it cannot really be experienced. It cannot be really explained until experienced. And that is related to that mercy and that unconditional love of God. Contrary to the assumptions of individuals that the experience of death is similar and the same for every individual, the moment before this phenomenon, after a specific um, um, the time, the time and how those events are unfolding is not the same. So even though that the pleasant and joyful experience of death is same among all individuals, but the experience of the events in the moment of death and the time after that is not the same. The reason of that is because of the differences between the individual's mental attachments toward their personal life or the life itself. In individuals, their life, it could be their wealth, power, status, even some on the surface positive things, for example, worshiping or the act of service or happiness or things like that. Any type of attachments, as you can see in the chart, regardless of whether it's positive or negative, is a factor that stops the individuals from moving forward. These attachments in the moment of death would be reviewed by the individual. So after the moment of death, what happens, the individuals would remember all the events of their life. And based on the importance and attachment, it would be categorized. And whether the individuals are attached or how strongly they're attached to what type of information or experiences or individuals or phenomena, then it would be a factor that pulls them back away from moving forward on their Kamal journey toward the unification with Beloved. So it is very important for individual to have a quality of detachment from any aspects of life as a result of a Kamal orientation and the excitement of unification with Beloved. So nothing would be prioritized after death to cause the individuals to not move forward and to be attached to certain experiences or to certain individuals or memories or things as such. So the experience of death itself, the separation of mental body from physical body is extremely joyful and sweet. It results the individuals to feel very light and very relieved. However, if the individual would be attached and wanting to go back to their body or resist this separation, can cause the individuals to feel pressure and to have that experience different, um, have that experience difficult. So, because of it is possible for the individuals to have a feeling of suffering as a result of the development of the association, negative association of death. So, regardless of the experience of the death, to be relieving and be very positive, the memories of the individual, and their attachment makes the phenomena of death difficult because they need to detach from their attachments, and they also want to resist, and it's not possible to resist that. So it makes the type of force and resistance through that process. So a Kamal-oriented individual with the awareness and understanding of the philosophy of death, the familiarity of the path toward that unification and merge with God, not only would resist or remain attached to their earthly experiences, but rather they embrace that journey, the ishq toward God, and their desire to move forward and returning to Him. It gives another level of beauty and glory to death. Whereas for individuals attached, it makes it a resisting and very difficult process of detaching from their attachments. There's a beautiful poetry from Nizami that beautifully expresses the awareness and understanding of the truth behind death from a Erfanic perspective. Talking about death as something to be celebrated, the acknowledgement of an aspect that causes the transition, and the readiness of the Arif for embracement, for embracing that phenomena for the unification of beloved. It's quite long poetry. I would like to read it for you. Maybe I just read it for you and I translate it. I do my best to translate it. I'm going to read the poetry in Farsi and I'm going to translate it for you. Hope you enjoy it. گر مرگ رسد چرا هراسم کان راه به توست میشناسم این مرگ نه باغ و بوستان است کو راه سرای دوستان است تا چند کنم ز مرگ فریاد چون مرگ از اوست مرگ من باد گر بنگرم آنچنان که رایی است این مرگ نه مرگ نقل جایی است از خوردگهی به خوابگاهی وز خوابگهی به بزم شاهی خوابی که به بزم توست راهش گردن نکشم ز خوابگاهش چون شوق تو هست خانه خیزم خوش خسبم و شادمانه خیزم. It says that if death is arriving, why would I fear? As I know that's the pathway toward you. It is the death, and this death is like gardens toward the pathway of beloved. Until when should I complain about death? As death is from beloved, so death be on me. As I look into how that path is, it's not death, but rather a transition from a smaller place to sleeping place is a metaphor, and from a sleeping place to a kingdom. A dream that its pathway leads toward you, I would not resist from its place. As the enthusiasm of yours exists, I exit the house, I sleep well, and wake up excited, which basically, um, it basically metaphorically uses this life as the home. It says, like, because I'm very excited about you, I exit my home and I peacefully sleep and happily wake up, or um, waking up with excitement. You can really, um, you need to really um, forgive my poor translation. I do my best as I'm just reading it. It's not very easy to translate it, but it can kind of give you the um, sense of how an arif has this inner standing and this inner knowing, that enthusiasm and awareness comes through in a beautiful poetry talking about the same notions and same concepts that we were just talking about. And we can see that these type of experiences are common among all the human beings, and it's leading to the same journey and the same pathway. Any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, it was really also great translation to, yeah, to have it from this view is really, yeah, is very poetic and very advanced, I would say, because I'm coming with a question. So in if one is not prepared in this way, so it's not like this RF see it, so how could be realized? So I'm really going to this and have to go in the next stage. I'm coming a bit from my own example, not really comparable, but it came in my mind, and it was a moment somebody attacked me and hit a bottle over my head, and I was really going down.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a moment I feel completely relaxed. It was so nice. It was so fine.
Mm-hmm.
But in a moment when I was down, I also jumped up because I had in mind this situation is going on. There were other people involved, and I saw them. People were fighting, and I tried to stop the fighting. So it switched directly. I was not dead, so I was not even in the near of death. So, but it comes in my mind. So we see in the world a lot of war, for example. In a war, suddenly young man is taken out, so he has a lot of things he want to do. He has a lot of yeah attractions, etc., etc. So how then one realizes this, or even it's not possible to realize that it's dead?
Mm-hmm.
Bit confusing for me to understand it from this from this very advanced way, like described in the poem,
Hmm.
that in the level not so be prepared, so it can cause a lot of difficulties.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Anyone else have any question or okay. After death, the um after death, the feeling of peace or restlessness of individuals is dependent on themselves. The pain and the suffering after death is as a result of the individual's attachment and individual's attachments and not wanting to let go and to be liberated from the attachments of this space and moving forward to the next life. And rather, the effort that the individuals put to return to their body or back to their life, which is not possible, and they would remain among individuals that are staying in that barzakh, in that intermediary stage, which is not optimal in many different ways. In this situation, the the um, in this situation, the suffering as a result of the pressure that comes from this circumstances in a way that the individuals resisting letting go of the attachments of the life and the pressure that they experience as a result, it makes their uh, which is which is based on which is as a result of incompatibility of their current state of existence with the life's experience in physical body, it puts them away. It stops them from moving forward. And in truth, it's it's for their benefits to leave their attachments. So in a more simpler explanation, the attachments of the individual's attachment would stop them from moving forward to a more optimal states and optimal circumstances, and state becomes um, that state becomes unpleasant. There's a beautiful poetry from Hafiz. It always um, comes to me when I'm particularly challenged in life in terms of things that I need to let go. And regardless of what that is, whether it's a physical thing, whether it's a internal idea, or if it requires some sort of sacrifice in any different way, it always come to me, and it's one of the most beautiful poetries because it's um, one verse and it has so much in it and it's beautifully said. Dr. Tari also says that one of the highest status that one can achieve in a physical life is the ability to lose. And that's really important and is really the gist of this poetry. It says, غلام همت آنم که زیر چرخ کبود ز هر چه رنگ تعلق پذیرد آزاد است. It says like the I'm in a slave, not a slave, but it's kind of like the word ghulam is like slave, but it basically a metaphor to show how humble he is So I would put it in that way. It says that I am extremely humbled by the perseverance and the himmat is like the um, it's kind of like this force and urge that motivates someone. So it kind of like this um, urge that someone has that puts his will toward a decision. So it's sort of like a very committed individual. So it says like he says, I am extremely humbled by the commitment and perseverance of the one under this cycle of life that is liberated from anything of attachment. Now it's much more poetic because there's a lot of metaphors in it, but that's basically the gist of it. So, as I mentioned, Dr. Tari also emphasizes on the importance of this quality status of one detached from anything on physical level. And a lot of people would associate love with attachment, which is a very destructive worldview and notion because it makes individuals extremely vulnerable and it makes individuals very limited in their Kamal journey if one would stay with that notion because attachments and love are completely different. Let's say a father that is attached to their children. If they don't let their children to leave and be independent and go explore the world and not be afraid of letting them go and letting them to fail so they can grow, they would never uh, mature as much as the other individuals would be able to be liberated and experiment and make mistakes and grow through those experiences and through those mistakes. So the attachment of individuals toward their children, toward their status, toward their wealth, toward their state, anything the individuals could be attached to, it starts to become anti-Kamal aspects in their life, not only in their life, but also uh, playing a very important role, playing a very important role after death. So barzakh, barzakh after this life, the mental body becomes dominant over the space dimension, and in any moment and any time that it wants to be in somewhere, it would be present there. So it's not time consuming for one to be in one space or from one place to the other. But they still experience the time with the same quantity as before death. So, from this perspective, in Barzakh is beyond space, but the dimensions of time and opposition remains the same. In order for us to become more familiar with Barzakh and some of this specification and the mystery and the password or the code, the or the secret of the passage through this stage, we're gonna examine more uh, of this specification. Some of the specifications of Barzakh is that in any stage in the motion, the intrinsic motion from the bottom of the cycle toward the unification moment, the merge with beloved. We constantly are affected by two forces. One of these forces is guiding us toward forward, and one is pulling us back. This force that helps us moving forward is the knowledge of Kamal. So we have the knowledge of Kamal that it helps individuals to move forward and not get stuck or having an inclination to move backwards. So in the individuals that acquired the knowledge of Kamal, they would not hesitate moving forward after they die. Whereas the individuals not having enough knowledge of Kamal, they would try to stay and they have the force of their attachments stronger than that urge to move forward, making them moving backwards or staying where they are. There's this aspect called rap. We will be more familiar with the rap more and more, but rap is the highest self, is the highest version of the self beyond the limitation of dimensions that is the closest to God. Each human being have their own rap and another aspect which is guiding spirit, which is the compass and help for individuals to be directed and pushed forward. So the message of rap, along with the guidance of guiding spirit, the inclination toward forward and unification is caused. And this inclination is not the same among every individuals. In another word, not everyone are sensitive to the message of guiding spirit or receiving it. Because the opposite force is in higher intensity and more dominant to be able to be negated by the other force. So in any stages, we have these two contradictory force that we are being pushed or pulled away from toward God or away from God, toward Kamal or away from Kamal. In any stage, these opposite forces are specific to each stage. So in each stage, these opposite forces are specific to that stage and are different. For example, in barzakh of spaceless, or in the barzakh of beyond space, which is the barzakh of this life, the attachments of mental body would urge the individuals to look back the life before death and keep them attached there. And another force, which is the opposite force, the force of guiding spirit that wants to move us forward toward Kamal and unification. So Barzakh becomes a trial scene, a scene for us to be tested, the art of each individuals, how much they gain the knowledge of Kamal, whether their choice would be moving forward or avoiding moving forward. Because it is only for individuals with the understanding of the necessity of going forward toward the next stages and next life that they would willingly pass through these stages and show their true art. the art of existing, the art of existence align with the natural law, the philosophy of existence, and the philosophy of creation. So the true artists are the ones who master the art of existence, being able to access the secret passages and the knowledge that allows them to move freely toward the direction of beloved for that unification. But Barzakh, other than the fact that it is a trial scene, it's also an opportunity to revision and to catch up with individuals' deficiencies. A lot of individuals that they are confused and lost as a result of the lack of sublimity and spiritual maturity and Kamal oriented knowledge. They are challenged by the level of their attachments, and they are able to gain enough awareness and understanding in each moment that they are in Barzakh to be able to catch up with their deficiencies. And the least thing that they can do to catch up with their unawareness and lack of Kamal orientation is to exit Barzakh as soon as possible. The secret of passage through Barzakh is that spiritual maturity, the sublimity, and Kamal orientation. In general, the foundation of sublimity and spiritual growth throughout life is provided through many different opportunities. And Barzakh also is an opportunity for that to be revealed and present and to in order and Barzakh is a opportunity for those to be presented and revealed. For example, the education of children without attachment, it allows them to be adults that are more Kamal oriented, individuals that are more free. And based on this, the children can get high up in the hierarchy of sublimity, and those aspects could become a factor of their spiritual maturity and sublimity. But if they are educated in an attached way and the attachment become an existential part of them, then their mental energy would be orienting toward themselves more, and it becomes an anti-Kamal factor causing them to fall. In life, the foundation for all these tests is provided, and the result of that would be indicated in Barzakh. In Barzakh, it is not possible for humans to show their art of life or the art of living in the physical world or to practice their knowledge regarding any earthly knowledge. But the minimum result of this test is to move forward without any attachment or without any resistance toward next life. Otherwise, it would imply their attachment and the fact that they're a slave to their attachments and their lack of knowledge of Kamal would be evident. Any question? Let's look at the relationship between each life and with its barzakh and its next life. in order for us to understand the relationship, we can explain it toward, we can explain it by this chart that you can see, the chart that you see. The tools for acquiring ma'rifat, divine knowledge, in any life is a little bit different than the life before or after. So in the current life, the basis of our cognition is logic. But we are able to use the faculty of ishq and be able to utilize the perception and understanding on the step of ishq. And so just like we open our eyes in this life on the operation based on logic, and then gradually be introduced with the concept of ishq and be able to utilize the aspects of ishq. In the next life, we start our experience on the step of ishq and we are able to move forward toward more sublime stages and qualities of ishq. For example, you see that in here that in past life we had an x dimension. Our we start our experience relying on that x dimension operation, and then we move forward throughout the experience of the past life and we achieve the operation on logic. Then we die, we start this life with the operation of logic, and then we um, achieve understanding of ishq. The next life, we start the experience from ishq and then move toward more sublime experiences of ishq. For example, we're gonna move from a more narcissistic ishq toward more unconditional ishq or understanding of ishq rahmani. Rahman is the same aspects of the same ishq that we experience from God, but we are experiencing it in a different level and we are able to operate or get closer to that operation from that stage and up to the limitation of that level. So the experience of ishq on the first step, it caused an understanding that it introduced us with the different levels of ishq. So the familiarity of the qualities of ishq from each stage is an opportunity for us to become more experienced and more available for the higher and higher levels of ishq. In order for us to experience ishq, it has its specific domain. We need to go through these experiences in a macro level. So in another way, we can say that the journey of Inna Lillah wa Inna Ilayhi Raji'un in a way is a journey going through courses of lives that it is giving us micro experiences to the for the preparation of a higher experiences of ishq. So we experience the lower aspects moving forward to building up to be ready to experience ishq to the level of God. So in the next life, we start life with understanding of the notion that the dominant, if you're starting the life more dominantly on the step of ishq and the aspects, the knowledge or the senses related to the logical knowledge is not useful. The passage through each life is passing through different grades of Kamal journey. Through this journey, we are able to grow on the journey of Kamal. And the only thing, as we established earlier, that we can transfer and we can take with us moving forward to the next life is the knowledge of Kamal. No knowledge, including power, skills, talents, theoretical information, none of those is transferable and useful to the next life. Therefore, the only thing that we can carry with us, it's ma'rifat. It's that divine knowledge as a result of understanding, positive awareness, and Kamal oriented knowledge. And these are the type of ma'rifat that we call knowledge of Kamal. So in Barzakh, after this life, nothing related to the knowledge on an earthly level would be useful. And what we can take with us is a consequence of, is the Kamal oriented knowledge a consequence of our life, the result of our understanding, the awarenesses that we had, that we can carry, influence our operation and approaches on its deepest level. So when the individuals dies, their knowledge is not really handy for them if it's not camel oriented. The amount of information they have is not gonna make them detach from their attachment. What makes them be able to move forward is that understanding, that inner knowing, that integration of the quality awareness about the notion that the goal is to unify with God, to move forward toward needlessness, and to not be attached to any stage or any experience itself. Using any of these stages, using any of these stages as an opportunity and as level to be more familiar and increase our knowledge to experience higher states of being and higher qualities of ishq. Any question?
Yeah, maybe so in regard that we leave the dimension of space, yes, of space, and in a way, in this life, we are depending what has to do with space. So we have physical bodies, so we have a neediness in regard to space, and when we leave space and we come in the we are in the dimension of time, still time and opportunity, then it is connected with our mental body because mental body connected with thinking, for example, so also need time. Physical body is connected with space, but mental body is more connected with the dimension of time. Can, is it possible? Is it? Can we see it in this way?
Um, I'm not sure exactly. Maybe you can formulate your question in a different way so I can. Um,
Yeah, going to from this aspect, going from neediness to needlessness.
mhm.
Um, so in the space dimension, so like we are here in space dimension, so we have a neediness because of yeah being in space, being in a physical body. So physical body has a need, etc. We cannot be in needlessness. So we go step by step to more needlessness on the way back to the unification with God. So in this next dimension, when we have still the time, so we are depending on time. So we are we are in need of time in a way, as I understand it. And from that aspect, it came to me. So we have a mental body, and the mental body is connected with the process of reflecting, the process of thinking, and thinking needs a time.
Okay.
Is not timeless. we
Uh,
are still then in
in what
the
stage are you talking about? Yes, there's some, if you're talking about the experience of
next
next life,
the next life.
okay.
Yes,
So the next life is, if I want to explain you, it's more like, if you were, it's more like something to be experienced, but I can try to explain based on what I experienced of next life, what that is, and some of the information that Dr. Chari also provides. So the experience of um, next life on a mental body, which like even mental body is gonna die because the mental body that we have when it enters the vehicle of next life is different than what we experience as in barzakh, but it's somehow similar, somewhat similar. But there is an observer, and the observer is observing and contemplating and processing information and operating based on sets of values or sets of inclination that are more dominant than the other. So essentially, the driving force within an individual would be this pre-programmed operation or software, just like what we see in children when they're very young. Like we see like very, very young children, like infants, and then maybe like a little bit later, we see that the characters are different, even if they're twins. And then that indicates that they operated in their own specific way in a previous life, and they programmed that part of themselves that it's carried to the next life. The conclusion and the result of that certain operation, how camel oriented is and how it's not, would makes a unique characteristic of the individual. And of course, they come to this physical body and there's external circumstances, and they practice it based on those circumstances, limiting circumstances, as well as their program and softwares that they brought with themselves. And of course, there are other aspects, environmental circumstances, sociocultural circumstances that they're being programmed as well, that combine with their programmed self, it makes their character shapes their character as they go, and that what we're going to talk thoroughly in Scientology. But then similar, as we are born and we don't remember how we got those information, or we don't even recognize that we have those attributes, and someone need to reflect on us and say like, you're this person or that person. A lot of the times, if we are on our own, we might not really realize what kind of person we are until interacting with others. So we need that external reflection of who we are and how we operate in order for us to really know. So for individuals that we come to this life, we really don't know how we have those information. We're just operating as it's very natural for us. But the fact is that we brought this result of the operation, a specific operation, that is as a result of the exercise of free will within the dynamic of previous life. And that basically is the extraction of the result of the camel orientation. It could be very low camel oriented or very high camel oriented, and we can see some specific attributes or operation in various individuals. Some are more interested about mystery of life or knowing the existence or knowing the purpose of creation, um, or camel oriented, or less narcissist, or some are more narcissist, some are more helpful just by nature, and some are not. And these are indicating this underlying operation as a result of some sort of sets of values that is very intrinsic in a sense. Now, same here, we are going through life and we are experiencing life as it is, and we are gaining specific experiences to become familiar with higher levels of ishq. Now, we can be very advanced in that knowledge, or we can be not at all, and that puts us toward more of a narcissist, or toward more of a more available for that ishq rahmani, that ishq that is unconditional, that is more giving. The concern of the ishq is not self, and it's outside of the self. Now, some of the memory, of course, we have the memory part of the mental body, and all the information, it's there. So when the individuals are dead, after that, they're able to recall information. So all their memory, all what happened in their life, it would be reviewed very fast. And there's also aspects of categorization and um, extraction and categorization and analysis of the information based on the attachment level. And based on the level of attachment, the individuals would feel the urge to pursue them. And that puts them more toward anti-Kamal, because their concerns becomes going back to re-experience their attachments or physical experiences or earthly experiences, rather than moving forward toward the direction that we're supposed to go. But when we die, uh, when we move forward to the next life, when we enter the next life, we no longer have access to the information or memory of this life. So then the individuals is just like a newborn in the next life, with that sets of operation, which is no body, of course. Yes, there's time, and the time makes the possibility, so that time is basically the aspects that separates moments from each other. Is chopping machine, that it separates moments from each other, and allowing the observer to experience only that moment independently from the moment before. Whereas when we remove time dimension, which we will discuss later, then everything collapses, and what we experience is eternity. But then there's different levels of eternity we can experience in regards to the path that we are in, that we will discuss in further courses. So what we have in the mental body, the parts that we carry after the birth in each life, is not evident really what the information is. It becomes just an extracted, conclusive general operation in an individual in regards to how Kamal oriented the individual is, and what are the aspects uh, more active in the individual than others in regards to Kamal orientation or not. And that's where the individuals actually don't remember what lives they lived, as we don't remember now. They don't know how they got this information or how they are operating the way they are. And the only information or the only thing existing is moving forward. So then the next life we die, and then we enter the barzakh of that life, which is that which is the other intermediary stage, entering timelessness, which I'm not going to get into it, which is very interesting experience. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, was a great explanation for me. Yeah, sometimes we try, or I try to go too logical with it. So but then it was
Yes.
not. Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I understand, because when we want to really logically understand it, as you said, is not possible, because all we know is the framework of here. So we can kind of use our imagination or visualization to try to kind of get some sense of logically how it would look like. But the goal is to have experiences of it. And then it's possible with the halghehs that we receive later in the course, since you went through the course, you have them. The enthusiasm toward the experiencing them, and then the availability and the surrender and neutral observation, it will come, and the experience would just, you would have the experience, and you just know this is it, and then it's really hard to explain it, um, really how it is. We can just use some words to really define, but it's really vague, but it's never going to be how exactly is. But this closest thing that you can think of is when you dream. When you dream, you're in your mental body, and regardless of, I mean, like, based it depending on what kind of dream you're having, but if it's like a merely a subconscious basically data analysis, or whether you're actually in your mental body and you're somewhere, and it's purposeful dreaming, but it's very close to when you dream you're in a mental body, and then you're and sometimes you're in places that you don't know what that place is. You actually there's no description or explanation of what that place is, but you have an inner knowing what that place is. You kind of like, and even if you want to explain your dream, you said like, I don't know what was it, but I knew that I was in this place or I was in this country, even though that it might not be very evident signs of being in that country, let's say. So the being and experiencing that state is just like being there and just knowing that it is, and there's no other way that I can explain it. All the experiences outside of body and then outside of the framework of this physical reality that we're gonna have through Halgheh is sets of experiences that you're gonna just find yourself there, and you just know that this is that, and then that's how it is. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I did so. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you're very
you.
welcome. Yeah. Anyone else have any question? Okay. Since we're gonna move to the next topic, let's do a few minutes at this all, and then we're gonna come back and continue our discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone would like to share or any question? You have my voice?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
For
Thank you,
me, it
sir.
was very intensive. Really, like how I can describe difficult. It was like changing places and environments, and it was really interesting.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay. Let's continue our discussion on the necessities of nafs. I'm gonna talk about nafs and the necessities of it in relationship to the needs that we have here, and the different bodies we have, the mental body and the body of psyche, and also the serpents of mind and psyche. Let's talk about management of the desires of the nafs. The nafs of humans are the aspects that makes the decision, speaks, and thinks. The physical body, body of psyche, mind, and astral body, etc., are all being hosted, hosting nafs. So the nafs of human being is the one that makes the decision, have the free will, and the various bodies, physical, psyche, mind, and astral, and etc., are hosting it. And the softwares like Logic, Nahar, Bonyad, Fetrat, which is instinctual software, fundamental software, the intrinsic software, the subconscious, and etc., are the necessities of nafs. The nafs of individuals have certain desires that in Erfanic motion needs to be controlled and managed. And for such a management, we need to really become familiar with this specification of nafs in regards to the desires and the necessities of it. So from this perspective, let's discuss some of these important factors in regards to the nafs and its specifications. When we say someone's doing something good or bad, a good action or bad action, or whether they are in the path of Kamal or anti-Kamal, we are talking about their nafs. So nafs is giving the possibility of going toward Kamal or anti-Kamal, causing good or evil, sins or virtues. Any individual cannot eradicate the ability of doing good or doing evil within themselves or taking it away from the nafs. However, individual could manage these aspects and control their tendency and desire for evil. Another factor is that the tendency toward eating, sleeping, and natural needs are the necessities for the health of the body, which is the vehicle of nafs, but it should not become a goal, or these tendencies or desire should not be suppressed. So there is some nuances here. Some individuals are looking at these desires of nafs a problem intrinsically in their spiritual journey, and what they try to do is to suppress them or completely eradicate them. Such a fight would be a failure because no one can remove the ability to make bad mistakes and um, have an act of evil completely. So some of these desires that are natural desires related to our physical body, let's say eating, sleeping, and other instinctual needs, are there for the purpose of maintaining the health of the physical body, the vehicle for nafs. Even though that these aspects are necessary for the health of the body, but these tendencies or desires should not be suppressed or should not be excessively approached. So any excessive approaches in any of those aspects, even if it's sleeping or eating or other instinctual needs, is not for the good of human being. Some of these nafs desires, for example, the tendency toward beauty, toward wealthy life or easy life, and etc., in and of itself is not a negative or evil tendency, but they could turn in a hidden way or a non-apparent way to an anti-Kamal aspects if they pass certain natural thresholds, or they might even cause the development of other different desires that would cause the delay of the Kamal path or to become anti-Kamal. So the important factor in this regard here is that increase of tendencies and desires is against Kamal, or it becomes a block for Kamal. No one cannot stop the tendency toward evil or the desires of nafs, or avoid the increase of the tendencies, and they cannot also directly fight them back. What they can do is to control these desires, to manage them, and to do their best to not be controlled by these desires. So the individuals that are aiming to fight against these desires or tendencies and eradicate them completely from their existence, they would fail in that game. And even if there are some people would manage to avoid or control some of these tendencies and maybe achieve to a certain stage, uh, there would be some individuals that this pressure, this suppression for standing against these tendencies or pleasures or desires altogether and rebelling against them would act like a spring and kind of fly off at some point. And we see that in individuals that they choose an ascetic path, maybe if they remove themselves from eating or having any type of instinctual physical experience, then let's say they have 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and suddenly they do something that is completely opposite of what they were aiming, and sometimes even worse than a normal, ordinary individuals that they never aim to do any spiritual achievements to gain some to gain any spiritual achievements. So the important factor is here to not standing in a fight directly against these tendencies and desires within, because they're there, they're naturally existence, and their philosophy of existence is there to give definition to other aspects. And the factor, the important factor here is to control and manage them. So humans don't have any other option other than um, act like a barrier, just like a dam, to stop this flood of desires and destroy their land. So the mental body and the body of psyche, or psychial body, are the are defending our desires and tendencies. And experience indicates that every time we want to avoid something, let's say if someone says like, I don't want to eat chocolate at all, and suddenly from the psychial level they go under extreme pressure, and from the mental level the chocolate becomes the most important thing in the world, and they develop a more and higher greed and temptation for it. So the analogy of the serpents on our shoulder, the two serpents on our shoulder, the serpents of mind and the serpent of mind and the serpent of psyche, is to really describe this force that nafs wants something, and if it's not provided, these two serpents would attack the individual. And normally individuals in all their decision-making process are under the influence of these two serpents, and these two serpents put them in trouble. For example, if someone is obligated to fulfill their particular diet, all the different foods that they need to avoid in their mind suddenly becomes the most pleasurable and most tasty of the foods. And on the psychial level, they feel a lot of pressure and they might even develop a diet depression. So, considering this, the management of the desires of nafs is something that requires an indirect method or indirect way or indirect approach. Many individuals experience that sometimes they are busy with something going through their days, and sometimes they completely forget to eat or drink and they're completely fine. And other days when they're bored or they don't have anything, even if they're not hungry, they might just open the fridge a few times and just close it. So that indicates that if someone is occupied by concern, that is more superior and more as a priority than other thing, and being busy with that, then they might not really feel their lack of sleep, or being hungry, uh, or having enough forces to stop them from what they're doing, and then get up and then go maybe sleep or eat something. This indicates that the attraction of the factors that we approach is very important, and the attraction of certain phenomena are dominating the others, and the desire of the individuals is dominated by these sets of attractions. So if an attraction, if an activity is attractive for someone, and the individuals have a lot of motivation and desire to do so, then other motivations and other desires might be disappeared from the equation. So even though that eating and sleeping might be something that one desire um, in a in a regular basis, but it seems like the motivation or the intensity, it seems like the intensity of the urge for that desire uh, is uh, is manipulated by another um, another aspects with a higher priority. So the motivation of any tasks that we have, uh, it can not eradicate. So in the motivation of certain tasks that we have has a big role to the motivation for other things or following other desires. So the higher the motivation is for a task, the less of attraction or motivation is for the other ones. And that is taking us closer to the notion of sublime motivation, which is explained in a very interesting analogy. Dr. Tari talks about the desires of nafs like the infinite stars in a dark night, that even though that they're present throughout the day, the light of the sun, it overrides the light of the stars, and it almost make them disappear from existence in a way, from our eye. And even though that all those desires exist, but we just don't notice it as a result of the presence of that sun. Now, that doesn't mean that those stars are destroyed or eradicated completely, but what that means is that the presence of the sun, that bright light, it make them not noticeable at all. So the sky of our existence, which is filled with the stars of desires, the only way to control those desires is to have a sun bright enough to make those desires organically and naturally disappear without trying to rebel and fight against directly or eradicate them from their roots, and creating more pressure and difficulties. For an individual that is in an Erfanic motion, in a path of Kamal, this sun is Ishq. Ishq, for an individual that is enthusiastic, becomes a doorway and a way for the individuals to have the connection with God, to, to fulfill the mission of servitude. Any other pleasure rather than the spiritual pleasure as a result of this connection and being in service is not noticeable anymore as a result of this bright sun. So that becomes a pathway, a door to the life with the presence of ishq and a sublime motivation that leads individuals to be liberated from the desires of nafs based on the power of ishq rather than a self-relying suppression that might cause depression or other type of psychosomatic illnesses, or development of an opposition with God, that why would you put these desires in us and ask us to avoid it? Like a lot of individuals would have such an objections when they want to bring forward their arguments about why the suggestions in religions are not fair, is mostly approaching it on a step of logic without understanding that those are the suggestions, but the way we should go about it is not relying on our own will and fight against these natural desires that are necessary to exist, but rather to be able to manage them, control them through the experience of ishq and having a higher motivation and more and um, and a sublime goal and purpose. So the more we are Kamal oriented, the more we are filled with ishq, the more the sun of that love and that motivation as a result of the sublime inclination would make the stars of the desires of the nafs disappear in the skies of our existence. Therefore, we don't need to really fight against them. So with the higher Kamal, there is higher Ishq, and then there is more control over and there is more control over the nafs desire and what we can bring forward as a result of nafs is also ishq. So from this notion we can draw the conclusion that with ishq the humanity and the experience of being a human would find a definition, and nafs becomes the most beautiful form of existence in universe. Any questions? Okay. Let's talk about the mental energy management. One of the most important factors in the journey of Kamal and in Erfan is mental energy management. As we mentioned before, losing or wasting excessive amount of mental energy on factors that are not relevant directly to the individual's life not only would makes us vulnerable uh, to develop all sorts of illnesses and disorders, but also delay our journey of Kamal. The mental energy of any individuals is consumed for specific topics through their thoughts, and each of them have a higher importance than the other, uh, depending on individual circumstances. But in general, almost everyone are dealing with these thoughts. For example, we have the thoughts related to our survival needs, our house, shelters, the education of children, their future, our future, etc. And all of those factors are necessary. But some of those factors that we put a lot of mental energy toward are not really necessary, and in fact, they're causing a lot of waste of mental energy. You can see in this chart that there are some different factors, that there are some necessary aspects here. We have the survival thoughts, and we have the shelter provision thoughts, we have children's education thoughts, we have defamation of others' thoughts, we have examination and analysis of unimportant thoughts, we have unpleasant thoughts, like random thoughts that are not really productive, and we have the thoughts of the whole, the thoughts toward Rab, the Kamal oriented thoughts. The lot of the oppositions, whether they are internal or external, let's say gossiping, defamation of others, analyzing unimportant information, as such, are wasting a lot of mental energy and taking away our ability to use that energy for more camel-oriented factors. In in general, any individual have a specific thoughts more important than the others. And some of these thoughts might occupy their mind so much that become the axis of their thoughts because their thoughts are the shadow of their axis. For this reason, what we see from a lot of individuals and how they present themselves is the axis of their thoughts, is how they think. For example, if we see someone that is consumed by the thoughts of wealth and money, then we can really recognize that from what they talk about and how they carry themselves. And we can see a lot of difference when we meet individuals that are Kamal oriented and their axis of thoughts is Kamal and their concerns of connection with the whole and God. So we can see a lot of difference between the quality of the presence of individuals, how they carry themselves, and the quality of their life and the experiences that we have with them. There's a beautiful poetry from Rumi that really uh, puts this notion beautifully in the sense that whatever that we seek, we are that. And he puts it in a very beautiful poetry. I'm going to read it to you and translate it. تا در طلب گوهر کانی کانی تا در هوس لقمه نانی نانی این نکته رمز اگر بدانی دانی هر چیز که در جستن آنی آنی. He says that until you're seeking treasure, you are the treasure. If you're after a piece of bread or in its temptation, you are that. If you know the secret, you would know whatever you're after, you're that. So he's also emphasizing on the same notion that whatever we are after, we become that on a more quality level. And that basically forms or define our existential axis, which is a very big topic, uh, and we will discuss it in 8th course, is one of the most important aspects, one of the most important notion in Erfan Halgheh, and we'll get to it later. But this is really relevant to that. There's another poetry. It says, گر از دل تو گل گذرد گل باشی بر بلبل بیقرار بلبل باشی تو جزئی و حق کل است اگر روزی چند اندیشه کل پیشه کنی کل باشی. He says, if flower passes from your heart, you are flowers. And if the bird that is longing, you're the bird. You are the part and the truth is the whole. If sometimes and few times in a day you think about the whole, you become the whole. The important point here is that the individuals that are able to do the mental management, they're able to reduce the waste of mental energy and use that for Kamal orientation. We know that our thoughts about the survival, the education of our children, our future, are necessary thoughts for the life that we have on earth. But many other thoughts that we have throughout the day, if we really regulate them and manage them, we will see that we can orient those thoughts using the wasted mental energy for Kamal purposes and the thought of the whole. So the more we reduce from wasted mental energy, the more possibility of the thought of Kamal is. And from another hand, the mind of individuals that are oriented toward Kamal would automatically reduce the unnecessary or irrelevant thoughts. So the mental management causes the increase of Kamal orientation and Kamal oriented thoughts. And also it increases the management of the individuals to not waste mental energy for unproductive and unnecessary factors. So when there is an enthusiasm of understanding of the truth of existence in relationship to God and the manifestation of Him, the more that enthusiasm increases, in general, individuals become more susceptible to discover the truth about the existence. They're more open to receive revelations and awarenesses when they're filled with the divine ishq. When the divine ishq fills the human's existence, the axis of their thought becomes kamal, and they're not able to waste any mental energy on unnecessary aspects. Now, if we pay attention to kamal and God orientation, and having that aspects integrated and incorporated in on an existential level, not only the axis of their thought becomes Kamal oriented, but also their existential axis becomes aligned with Kamal. And more precisely, if someone get to the Erfanic understanding of such a notion, from one hand, everything that they look, it's the manifestation of God, is the image of God. And from the other hand, they become aware that any praise or any appreciation, uh, it's directed toward God, and um, all the attention, all the energy consumption, all in their being level is toward God. And that's the true definition of Alhamdulillah, which means that all the praises and all the appreciation belongs to God. The existential axis of individuals is the most hidden layers of existence that no one can have a direct awareness or understanding or relationship or connection to them and knowing about their states, but is the Kamal axis, is something that can allow individuals to become da'imul ittisal, or continuously in connection, or constant connection, whereas the individuals are continuously and constantly in the state of connection with God as they walk, as they think, as they are. They are a reflection of the presence of God. They are the reflection of the harmony for existence, in alignment with the natural laws, and any production, whether their speech, their thoughts, their behaviors, even the movement of their fingers, would be emitting alignment and Kamal orientation in existence. In such a cases, we say that the existential axis of someone is positive, and then they become and they achieve the state of constant connection. That's the highest and the most optimal state that one can achieve in this life. Any question? When the individual achieve in such a state, they might be unaware themselves. So it is not very evident for individuals being in the state that they achieve the state. So it is not a quality of a state that is very apparent, but the effect of the existential access, the T consciousness emission around them, it's all positive, and it would be remained in the depth of anything that they do. So if the individuals get to such a state, anywhere that they look, they see the face of God. Any attention and praise would be belonging to God because they don't see anything but God. Their existential axis is solidified in positive, and the result of that is constant positive T consciousness emission. Any question? Okay. If you don't have any question, let's do a 15 minutes at the Sal, and we come back for some questions, and that's it for tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone would like to share? Anyone have any question? Okay. So I wish you a great night and see you next week. We're gonna start with that. You're very welcome. We're gonna start the third course next week. So let me know if you are still interested, and I'll keep you in the group. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you so much as well.
You're
Thank you
very
for the
welcome,
next
Ralph.
presentation. Good
Thank you.
night, all. Ciao. See you next week.
See you next week. Good night.
Bye, brother.
Good
Bye, everyone.
night.